Hello there, my name's Stephen Ball, and in this video we're going to be looking at binding objects directly into VCL applications. So let's get straight in. So I'm going to start with a blank VCL application, and first of all I'm going to put down a ListView, which we're going to use to show the list of all our objects. And I'm going to use a ProtoTypeBindSource, which we're going to use at the prototyping stage. Now with data sets you have data and you can see what you're doing. It's a lot harder when you're working with object instances that are created at runtime. You want to be able to see how it's going to look, so we're going to use the ProtoTypeBindSource here. I'm also going to use a standard edit control that we're going to use for putting some values into. So let's go ahead and add fields to our ProtoTypeBindSource. Now these fields are going to map to the properties of the objects later on. So we can use these generators that will give us sample data at design time. And I'm going to go ahead here and just use the bitmap name, and I'm going to call this name will do. And let's go ahead and we have an alpha colors, so we'll just call this value. So now let's go ahead and right click and bind visually, and we're just going to use this star to keep in sync. So it's going to keep the list view in sync with the data or our list of objects. We're going to use the item that we have called name and link it to the item caption. And let's just go ahead and change this to be a list so we can see those a little bit easier. And the edit control here, I'm going to link the edit control to the value. So let's go ahead and run this, and we can see as we change the selected item, the values are updating. This is just sample data. So we now have our prototype, and let's just say that we're happy with how that's looking. Now all we need to do is connect our real object into the ProtoTypeBindSource. So first we need the object, and I've predefined that we're going to have a name and a value. So just for speed I'm going to put this in here. Obviously you'd normally put this in a separate unit and unit test it properly, but I'm going to call this tfoo, which equals a class TObject. And we're going to have a property called name, which we're going to have as a string, and a property value, which we're going to have as an integer. And yeah, that'll do. All we need to do now on the ProtoTypeBindSource, we can link this to the objects. Now we have a variable here called BindSourceAdapter, so I can do a BindSourceAdapter, and we can create this to be a number of different object adapters. I'm going to use the list BindSourceAdapter here, which is going to take a tfoo, so we just need to create that to the local form, and this needs a list, so let's put foo list, and I'm just going to say yes, it's going to manage the memory here. So let's go ahead and create foo list, which is going to be a TObject list of type tfoo, and it's going to own the memory. Now I need to just define in the uses that we're going to use system.generics.collections, and this is going to be TObject list type tfoo. And now we need to do is just add some objects into our object list. So we can do foo list.add foo. That's going to be a type of tfoo, so tfoo equals foo equals tfoo.create, foo.name equals Stephen, and foo.value equals 100, and then let's just repeat this again. and we can put James 200. As we go and run, we now have changed this, so we've got live data, we've got Stephen and James, and if I go ahead and change this to 400, we can see that's going to maintain the state as well. So one last tip, I'm actually going to just make James properly. You're probably going to want to load objects in or fetch them. You might want to manage this list as a global list. One thing that you will need to do if you don't want to do that is just go and override the form create. So constructor create a owner T component. And what you need to do is you need to make sure that we actually put this before the inherited create. And the reason for that, as it calls inherited create, the component's going to get created on the form, this is going to fire, and then the form create event's going to fire. So if you want to actually create your object list and then have it populate on the screen, you need to have that foo list available. So we actually need to move this foo list up to our private section of the form and just move this up. And we can see here that this is actually getting fired now, but that's actually after the event. So the data has already been created at that point.